How's everyone doing today?
Hey, Matt. How are you?
Good to see you. Yes. Wait a couple more minutes for everybody.
Hey everyone. Hey Matt. Hey Megan.
Arjun, how are you?
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Good. How are you?
Fantastic.
Awesome. Great to see everyone on the call. John, Lynn, Michael, Dee, Karen, Mr. Dimitri, Jeff, everyone else. We'll get started momentarily.
Sounds good.
Matt, I'm going to pass it to Megan first before we kick it to you, okay?
Yeah, sounds great.
Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful sunny day, finally. Sun poking out of the clouds in Manhattan here.
It is. We're having a perfect weather right now, actually, for once.
Yeah, cannot complain.
Yeah.
We'll wait till tomorrow for the cold front and the rain,
Yeah.
just when we're off work,
Yeah,
as
exactly.
usual, as usual. All right, well, we are going to get started. It's 3 o'clock East Coast time on the dot. I can officially say good afternoon to everybody, even if you're on the West Coast. If you're on and you're not speaking, if you could put yourself on mute now, that would be appreciated. If you are presenting, obviously, you're feel free to stay off mute. Very excited to bring the Winesellers University concept back for 2024. We did this as a prototype for 2023, thanks to Matt and Lee and the entire Winesellers team. The feedback that we received was very positive, that these sessions packed a punch. There was education coupled with practical application in the field. So that was great. So thank you all for your feedback. And based on that, Matt and the team have worked hard to bring this back. This is going to be one of 4 sessions throughout the year. It's unbelievable what they're able to cover in 60 minutes. I will remind you to stay on mute, please. Gentle reminder. This session is particularly for those of us at Winebow who have been selling the Winesellers portfolio for less than a year. So for the Winesellers team's edification, it's not going to be every single sales consultant or manager at Winebow, but you'll see most of the senior team here as you see their faces as well as broad and chain, but particularly focused on that. So what's nice about that is we have a little bit more of a focused group, and we're going to take this as an immersion. If you have questions or comments, we will encourage you to use the chat function. Megan Garuder and I, who I'm about to introduce, will monitor the chats. Matt and team are usually very good at picking up those chats and questions. Please keep the chat focused to Winesellers, please, and focus to questions regarding the particular subject matter. Thank you in advance. So with that, I would like to present or represent to those of you who don't know her, Megan Garuder, who is one of our portfolio managers at Winebow. We're very lucky to have her. She's based in Florida, and she is also wears multiple hats. And one of the hats that's important to the company that she wears is she is the national portfolio manager for Winesellers for the whole country. And I would like to present her to say a few words before we kick off the seminar. So with that, Megan Garuder, thank you.
Thank you, Arjun. I appreciate the kind words, and also a little bit of a pre-introduction to the presentation that Matt will have for us shortly. As I'm looking at my screen, I see a lot of familiar faces, and actually some faces I've never seen before, but yet I've seen your name. So it's so great to see people like Karen Van Dyke and some of my other portfolio members from all over the country. And I'm just so glad that everyone is able to join us this Friday afternoon. It's a great way to kick off the weekend. Arjun, you had mentioned that last year was a tremendous success. And I was looking back at the note that John McFadden had sent the team, and it is spot on. It is not just about Winesellers education, but it's some very useful sales tools that I hope that you will use in the market, and that you'll think of Winesellers and this presentation when you're out meeting with your customers. I do get to work very closely with the Winesellers team, and Matt Johnson is a great partner. We are nationally aligned with Winesellers. They are a very talented and collaborative group, and Matt certainly exemplifies that. He's a great presenter. We're really thrilled that he's here today to share his knowledge. And so, Matt, without further ado, I will pass the mic over to you for your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Megan. I appreciate the words. And I will echo what Megan said. First of all, I think Arjun meant to say her most important hat is Winesellers National Portfolio Manager. But yes, we love Megan. She wrangles us, which is super important, right? We have a lot of people running around, and Megan keeps us all together and keeps us on task. I'm sure she does the same at Winebow, because she certainly does for us. So for those of you who did not see these last year we did 4. 2 were more education-based, focused on natural wines and then terroir, and then 2 were more sales-based, focused on selling to on-premise and selling to retail. So when we discussed with Arjun doing these again this year, there's going to be 3 parts this year. So we have this one, and then in 1 month we have another one. And then the next one isn't until September. So there's 3, they'll be spread out over, 6 months or so. Last time we did one was in September, so we're talking seven months ago or so, maybe a little bit longer than that. So it's been a while. But what we decided this year is to dig a little bit deeper into education and obviously have the sales component as well. So this first one will be, without further ado, I'll start sharing anyway. This first one will be on food and wine pairing. So in today's world, as we all of us are trying to figure out how we can break through to different buyers, to different categories, how we can get past what's happening with consumption across the country, how we can get people more interested in wine. To me, I think that this is a super appropriate training where we can discuss some of the ways that you can be experts. In our on-premise section, one of the things that I mentioned multiple times is you guys are experts, right? You really are. Winebow, your history really stems from selling high-end wine to on-premise and boutique retail. And the same remains true of Winesellers, right? Pre-COVID, Winesellers were 60% on-premise. We're still 50% on-premise. So we are certainly really heavily focused on that segment of the industry. So we'll dive in. One thing I want to mention is Lee Schlesinger who you guys know is actually on vacation because we moved this a week. So he is not here with me today, but with me is Michelle Moreno. I don't know if Michelle is on. If you're on, Michelle.
I'm on.
All right,
Hi,
perfect.
I'm here.
She's known as unknown user here.
Yes, I
So
had my
Michelle,
name on
Michelle is one of our specialists based in Austin, Texas. She was integral in putting this whole presentation together. She is working on her diploma with WSET, right, Michelle?
I will start that this summer. Yes.
Yes. So she wanted to kind of get more involved with our education. So we've got Michelle here. So she will go through a couple of these segments as well. And Michelle, like I said, feel free to jump in whenever you'd like, and speak up. So without further ado, we'll go in. So again, I know there's some new people here, so I put a couple of overall slides about Winesellers. I do think it's always important to talk about us and about the history we have with Winebow, right? So Winesellers as a company, we have a portfolio of about 55 brands. We've slowly whittled it down to 55, which makes everybody here happy, right? Myself included. So really all-star producers from around the world. We are 100% family owned. So Adam and Jordan Sager are the co-presidents. Their father, Yale, is the CEO. We have about 40 people across the country managing our business in all 50 states. And we have top press, right? We won Importer of the Year from Wine Enthusiast. We also won Importer of the Year from Wine and Spirits. We had a great Market Watch article about us a few years back about the Sager family specifically. And then Zaccardi, which is one of our largest and most important producers, won World's Best Vineyard 3 years in a row, and now they're in the Hall of Fame, so they can no longer win, or they'd still be winning. So again, those articles I mentioned, Market Watch, Wine Business International. I think it's important to point this out. We're a company that certainly gets the press. The Sagers are people that work extremely hard. They're highly connected in the industry, and certainly we're all happy and proud to work for them and to represent the portfolio we represent. So this timeline here is just to show you, okay, we've been around since 1977, right? Officially selling in 1978. What's important about this is to show you that the producers we represent, we've been representing for decades, right? We really work hard to represent family-owned wineries and have a long, loyal history with those producers. So as I mentioned earlier, our largest producer, which is Familia Zaccardi, which includes Zaccardi Val d'Uco, as well as Bodega Santa Julia. We've represented them since 1995. So next year will be our 30th anniversary with the Zaccardi family. So certainly who the Sagers are, who we are, we're loyal people, and the same remains true of our relationship with Winebow. So we've been with Winebow, really since the beginning, right? We partnered with Country Vintner and Stakel and Quality Wine and Henry Wine Group and all these others, right? And then Winebow started to purchase different distributors across the country. We were aligned already, and now we have this really great tight partnership that we're proud to be a part of and really happy for. Our portfolio, as I mentioned to you, it spreads the entire country. The entire world. So we represent wine from every major wine producing country in the world. What's important to note is that we really work hard to not have redundancy, right? So we in a perfect world, we will have one all-star family-owned estate from each major wine growing region, and then we'll move on to the next. And we will not have multiple producers within a region. It's really not how we try to do things. Certainly you guys have to do that as a wholesaler, but as an importer, we want to have that one all-star that we really represent, right? The only country you don't see represented here is South Africa, which we do not represent an estate in South Africa, although we do have a wine from there. But like I said, it's a broad and diverse portfolio. The only place where there could be a relative small amount of redundancy might be Germany, but actually our producers are pretty well laid out between, the Mosel and Rheinhausen and Pfalz, et cetera, et cetera. So, but we do have a very deep and rich German book. The reason I point this map out and I try to go a little more in depth about it is that when you talk about food and wine pairing, certainly we have a portfolio that can match it all, right? So after this presentation, this recording, as well as this presentation, will be available to you all. What I'm also going to include is what we call our perfect wine list, which most of you have seen. Our perfect wine list is an on-premise listing of how each of our wines should be listed, what they're by the glass price, what they're by the bottle price is, and what areas they can fit into on a wine list as well. So we have a couple different versions of it. So I will make sure that everybody on this call and of course within Winebow gets that as well. So really, when you think of on-premise, you should think of Winesellers as your one-stop shop, right? It's important that everybody knows that and sees what we have to represent. You guys know all your managers. I just have this on there so you can see it, but we're well spread out across the country. And then the Winebow markets. So we're with you guys in 13 states. We represent in those 13 states together about 300,000 cases and growing. And we are extremely happy and excited to be a part of the Winebow family. And I did choose blue, like the blue table, right? We are part of the blue table, I hope. All right, so let's go. Oh, shoot. Is that showing, Megan? Is that sound working?
I don't hear
No,
anything,
shoot.
but I do
All
see
right,
the
give me
video.
1 second. I'm gonna come right back. Hold on. I always forget this.
And if it's an SNL skit, I definitely want to hear it. So.
Yes, I'm back. It's gonna come back now. I always forget this piece.
Oh, I'm gonna have a drink. Yeah.
All right, so sorry. So just a little comedy there, right, to start off. But the point is, you know, we work in the food and wine industry, right? We work in the wine business. We're selling fine wine. We have more to sell than just brands, right? And we're not selling kind of the cheap hard seltzers that everybody's representing. I'm sure you guys have some in your portfolio. But what makes it so unique to do what we do is that it takes more than just making a brand, right? There's estates, there's family, there's history, and you specializing in food and wine pairing and understanding how the theories work are a way for us all to sell more wine, to be more applicable to our accounts, to be somebody that our accounts can lean on. So I think that's why we dig into this today. Like I said, feel free to ask questions. Michelle, too, if you could keep an eye on the chat as people, I know Megan will as well. So if there's questions that come up, feel free to put them in there. We're going to try to do this as quick as we can. We will go into your standard pairings as well as some off the beaten track pairings, but it's really certainly a time for questions and us to answer as well. One more video, then there's no more, I promise. Okay. So structured approach to tasting. One of the pieces, I guess, and again, this will be available for you after to dig into. I'm not going to go through all this verbiage. But what's important to state is that in order for us to suggest food and wine pairings, to understand how it's done, we need to know the structural components of both food and wine. So general structured approach to tasting helps us to identify various components of wine, the most fundamental of which for wine pairing is structure, with aromas and flavors playing a major role as well. So what's important to note is that we have to understand what the wine tastes like, what the components are, and we have to have a structured approach to how we look at it. So we'll kind of take into the side that you guys understand the basic components of tasting as we move into food and wine pairing. But if you don't, that's certainly the place to start, right? We're not going to do a presentation on structure on tasting. I'm sure you guys do them now at Winebow. If you were a buyer previously, it's certainly part of what the wine and spirits industry is all about. So foils and bridges, I think Michelle is going to take these. Am I correct, Michelle?
Yes, I will
All
jump
right.
on those. So foils and bridges are just two kind of theories of how to pair your food and wine. One being foils, which are going to be opposite characteristics of wine and food to help kind of balance each other out. For example, fatty cheeses going with a nice, crisp, acidic wine, which can cleanse your palate and prepare your tongue ready for that next bite. Below is a little chart that I found that kind of gives you the best kind of descriptors and pairings. So, for example, white wines, vegetables, and fruits, which have kind of some acidic and also sweet notes, can pair nicely with each other because they are opposites of each other. And I put on there lemon garnacha, La Maldita, a great fruity style wine, which can also help counterbalance the gamey and fattiness of lamb. Bridges are going to be similar characteristics. So they're going to go hand in hand. Generally, kind of the similar aromas, similar flavors in both the food and the wine that can help tie them together and make them more cohesive and complementary to each other. For example, mushrooms, Pinot Noir, those go hand in hand for sure. Below again is a chart that just can kind of help simplify that with some examples of Sauvignon Blanc going with nice citrus notes of food, bell peppery, fennel, garlic, and then of course we have all your basic varietals that can help you kind of guide you and structure a tasting if you find yourself in a position where you are asked to make a recommendation of, hey, I'm having this as a dish. Can you make a recommendation?
Yeah, and I would add a couple more to this as well that I think might be appropriate. But you can also do this with vintages, right? So one bridge that is somewhat relatively common, let's say, is like a caramel creme brulee, right? Like it's tough to pair. The brulee itself, okay, you can pair, but the brulee on top where it has that caramel characteristic, one of the ways you can pair with that is you can get an aged sweet white that has kind of that caramel characteristic to it because of the age on the wine. Another one that I personally have used and love as well is goat cheese, right? You have a salad and you're trying to figure out how am I going to pair this salad course with wine, but the addition of goat cheese is going to make it a perfect pairing with Sauvignon Blanc or some crisp white that can pair with the saltiness of the goat cheese. So sometimes you can use different components of a meal, that you can add something to the meal to make sure that you can bridge the wine and food together if you can't figure out how to do it separately. Okay, so now we're going to go into flavor. So this is where we'll spend most of our time today, and then Michelle will take us home when we talk about the 5 theories. Okay. Again, these are big graphs and charts. I think they're nice. So we put Michelle put them in here so that you guys have these as something you can use. It's really nice because it shows you, what pairs with fruity, what pairs with caramel or woody or earthy, and what those components are when you're talking about wine, right? How those components are identified as these characteristics. But what's important is that on your palate, right? Sweetness, acidity, tannin, alcohol, body, flavor intensity, flavor characteristics, and then the finish are obviously the pieces that we're talking about as we get into pairing here. One key point that I think is important, and I added this, Michelle probably hasn't seen it because I added it right before this, but is that people have varying sensitivities. One of the things we always talk about in the wine business, at least I say it all the time, is that wine is subjective, right? Nobody can, it's hard for us to tell somebody what a good wine is, right? What's going to be a great wine for them, right? Everybody has something that they enjoy, and that's the great thing about wine is we don't all have to enjoy the same thing. It's just like life, right? We find things that we really appreciate and we go heavy into those things. And so that's the same thing with wine. And when it comes to wine pairing, you have varying levels of sensitivity that people have. So there are people that have a sweet sensitivity, right? Where they prefer sweet wines. And generally those would be, Rieslings, White Zinfandel, Sangrias, stuff like that. Your selling opportunity are other varietals that are maybe a little different to them. Moscato, Sweet Riesling, and other sweet wines. What you want to avoid with pairing for people with that type of a palate is overplaying the food and wine pairing and selling dry wines, right? Really focus it towards their sweeter palate. Hypersensitive people are people that primarily prefer dry and slightly off dry wines, right? So what your opportunity is there is dry, less intense whites or rosés and very smooth, lighter intensity reds. And then there's people that are sensitive, right? And I would say most of us on this call and most people in the wine business are probably in this sensitive category, where your wine preferences run a complete spectrum of styles and flavors. So these are people that are more open to exploring, have a wide range of flavor acceptability. They're the people you can have fun with when it comes to a tasting. And then there's tolerant people, right? These are the verbiage is what it is, but these people are the ones that prefer big, strong wines, big reds, right? Your opportunities are the big reds, right? And you all know this. So if you're going into a wine dinner with a high-end Napa producer that really specializes in, Napa cabs, then the people that bought tickets to that wine dinner are probably in this tolerant group. So you're going to start to do your pairings based on that, knowing that that's their palate, and try to play your pairings towards their palate rather than trick them or try to get them into something different, right? If you're doing a wine dinner For Burgundy or some high-end, European wines, you probably have more of a category of sensitive people. So you can be really open, and you can do a lot of different things when it comes to the pairings. If you have a producer from Germany that's very well known for making sweet Rieslings, you can assume that the people that are coming to that wine dinner have a sweet sensitivity, right? They're the people that want those sweet wines. So you can make sure that you're pairing accordingly and not trying to sell them dry wines, even though they enjoy sweet wines, right? So this is just a way for us to kind of understand that what's good for one person is not always good for the other. There are classic ways we can pair wine, but it doesn't mean it works perfectly for everybody. So also knowing your audience is a piece you want to make sure you understand. All right, components of the food palette. So these are 6 general flavors perceived in food, right? Sweetness, which you get on the tip of your tongue. Salty, which is kind of the side back of your tongue. Acidity, which is called sour here, and that's kind of the front sides of your tongue. Bitter, which is in the back. Umami, which is right in the middle, and then spicy, which kind of sits between sour and salty, right? So these are the flavors we're going to focus on. We're going to talk about wine pairing with foods like this. And we will go there. So first and foremost is sweet. So what do you consider when you're pairing sweet foods? Sweetness in food increases the perception of bitterness and acidity, and it decreases the sweetness in body and wine. So sweetness in food can make a dry wine lose its fruit and be bitter and acidic. So one of the keys is to make sure that your sweet wine has at least the same amount of sugar as the sweet dish, right? It has to have that same level of sugar. If it doesn't, you risk really just making the wine look bad, really. And so that's what we want to avoid. You want to choose a wine with a balancing level of sweetness, right, to the dish. So the flavors complement each other instead of fighting against one another. So the key takeaway here, sweet dish, look for a sweet wine. It's always going to be the easiest way. There are other ways to pair, but when it comes to sweet, because it's so hard for anything else to stand up to a dish like that, a sweet wine that has an equal level of sweetness at least is always going to be the way to go. So what we did is we put together a few recommended pairings with our portfolio and some traditional dishes that you will see on a menu. So we'll go through these, and they'll also explain to you why these dishes pair with the food, right? So flourless chocolate cake, it's on a lot of different menus, right? Even if it's not flourless, but we would pair that with Quinta de la Rosa tawny or 10-year tawny port, right? The tawny is a $20 by the glass price, just so you guys have that. Again, as we talk about pricing on here, if it says by the glass, that means that's the average bottle cost across the country, okay? And if it says by the bottle, it means it's the average bottle cost times 3, right? So that's how we've placed the pricing into this. So anything that is like $25 or less by the bottle, as a bottle cost, we've listed as a by the glass price. And if it's over that, then we've only listed the by the bottle price. But the reason this fits, right? So the sweet nuttiness of the port will balance the bitterness of the chocolate and the sweetness of the cake, right? Port and chocolate is perfect. Sometimes it's things we forget about. Quinta de la Rosa is a fantastic family-owned producer that we have. They have wines both from the Douro Valley and dry reds as well as ports. But if you have not seen them, please take a look. We're with them we're with you guys in all of our markets. You have Quinta de la Rosa. Creme brulee, one I mentioned earlier with Santa Julia Tardillo, right? So the sweet citrus notes of the Tardillo will cut the cream and balance the sugary sweetness of the brulee. The creme brulee can certainly take over a lot of wines. Tardillo is a perfect pairing to make sure that it's not overtaken by the sweetness of the creme brulee. Dark chocolate truffles with Quinta de la Rosa ruby port. So we go back to port again, right? But the bright, rich, sweet fruit of the port will balance the richness of the truffle and lessen the bitterness. The important point is that sweetness will lessen the bitterness. Fruit tart, right? With Ricosa Moscato. Ricosa Moscato is something that a lot of you aren't selling yet, because actually this was under 6% alcohol. So a lot of markets like New York, it wasn't legal to sell in. We're increasing the alcohol, so this will be available in every market soon enough, hopefully by the summertime. But it's one, so we thought it was one that was important to include here. But the slightly sweet, bright fruit will enhance the fruit of the tart. right, of the fruit tart. The acid will cut through the creaminess of the pudding. Moscato d'Asti is a great pairing for dessert because it doesn't, as Michelle puts here, it does not just have sweetness. It always has bright acidity and fruit, right? And then that effervescence, right? That frizzante characteristic will really help to uplift sweetness as well. So it's a perfect one to pair with desserts. Walnuts and figs, again, one that's not simple to pair, but perfect pairing for that is Zaccardi Malamato, right, which is Zaccardi's version of port. The notes of fig and rich sweet fruit will pair nicely with the sweet fig and sweet nutty walnuts that come with this dish, right? We'll all be hungry by the end of this right now. So the next one we go to is salty. So what do we consider when we want to talk about pairing with salty foods? Salt increases the perception of bitterness and the acidity in wine, right? Sorry, it decreases the perception of bitterness and acidity in the wine. It increases the perception of body. All right, so that's something to keep in perspective, and that's why we talked earlier about how you have to kind of understand the wine before you compare it, because you have to know what kind of body your wine has, what the bitterness is like, what the acidity is like. If you don't understand those things, you can't figure out how to pair it, right? Salt also softens everything that is hard and rounds out taste. So it gives everything more body, right? Including the wine, as we mentioned. And then saltiness brings out sweetness. Sweet and salty is obviously something that goes back a long way. It hides tannins and it decreases bitterness. So the takeaway here is that a salty dish, you should look for a fruity, acidic wine, perhaps with a hint of sweetness. And some of our recommended pairings here. So again, we've got port, late bottle vintage port. So blue cheese with Quinta de la Rosa LBV. This deep, rich sweetness will round the saltiness of the cheese and tone down the pungent flavor, right? Cheeses and wine are always known to pair well, but that's one of the reasons, because cheeses can be so salty and wine can be rich and sweet. So it pairs well as a foil, right? Caviar with Besserat de Bellafon Blue Brut, right? Quinta de Rosa late bottle vintage by the way, it was $20 by the glass. Besserat de Bellafon Blue Brut should be about $30 by the glass. So this crisp acidic bubbles will balance the salty caviar. Caviar and champagne is a classic pairing. It's something that certainly you guys should try if you have not before, but that's the reason. The acidic bubbles really balance out the salty caviar, and together they go perfectly because of that. The other important point about food and wine pairing, as we mentioned, is that you uplift the food. When you're bringing in wines that pair well and balance the food, then you make the food taste better, right? And you make the wine taste better, right? And the whole point of food and wine pairing is that you're not doing anything to make either one of them taste worse, right? And again, all of us, we're in the industry, right? We're proponents of enjoying a glass of wine when you want to enjoy it with whatever you want to enjoy it. But here we're talking about how you would pair if you're really trying to uplift the character of both wines, of both things, the food and the wine. So Chinese chicken and broccoli with Dr. Tanish, Bernkasseler, Dr. Riesling, right? A sweeter style wine. So the sweetness of the Riesling will soften the saltiness of the sauces. German wine and Chinese food goes way back, right? It's certainly something that goes well together. But the acid will also cut through the fattiness of the chicken, and they will enhance the vegetables, right? Great thing about German wine is not only do you have that level of sweetness, you also have a really strong backbone of acidity, right? I said this to people in my company. I went to Germany a few years ago went to all of our producers, and I came home and my mouth was so sore and I couldn't understand why. And then I realized it was from spitting that high acid German wine over and over and over again for a week. I'd almost like burnt a hole through my lips, right? But the acid is why it pairs so well with so many different types of food.
It will take the enamel off your teeth for sure.
100%. Yeah. You won't even have to worry about brushing your teeth while you're there.
Yeah.
So prosciutto with Ti Amo Pinot Grigio. So we tried to have some that were a little bit different, right? Like tannish. And then some that are applicable to everybody on this call, right? Ti Amo Pinot Grigio, it's an organic Pinot Grigio from the Veneto, from Della Venezia, which is one of our driving force wines, right? But this goes fantastically well with something like prosciutto, right? And actually, when this pairing was suggested, I was like, I don't know. And then as I start looking into it and thinking about it, I'm like, all right, it makes sense to me, right? But the citrus notes and the acid of the Pinot Grigio, they soften the saltiness of the prosciutto, right? And so that's why it goes so well together. You've got a $9 by the glass, easy drinking organic Pinot Grigio. That's going to go fantastic with something like prosciutto, right? All right, acidic. So when we say the word sour previously, we're also talking about acidic. So what do we need to consider when we're pairing acidic sour foods? Most foods contain acidity, right? If food didn't have any acidity at all, in my opinion, it's probably not good, right? It increases the perception of body and sweetness / fruitiness in wine, right? That's what acidic does. It decreases the perception of acidity in the wine. So you can have really high acid wine with really high acid food, and you should, because if you don't, the wine's going to taste very flat. Acidity is generally a good thing for food and wine pairing. It can bring a very high acid wine into balance, and it can enhance its fruitiness. Low acid wines paired with high acid foods can make the wine seem flat and flabby, right? Which is the last thing we want to do. To me, it's like the biggest insult you can hear from somebody is like, man, this wine's just kind of flabby, right? It's like the biggest insult you can ever hear. So you don't want to do that, right? You don't want to take this wine that might be a great wine, but the acidity is too low for the high acid food you're pairing it with, and all of a sudden that wine just does not look good, even though it is a good wine. These very highly acidic foods like vinaigrette salad dressings are not ideal with wine because they tend to cancel out the wine's flavor, right? And so that's something we always have to keep in mind. The takeaway here is that a high acid dish, you should look for a high acid wine, right? And there's tons of them. There might be wines that and this is the key to food and wine pairing, and it's also the key to what, the next installment of this is about the history of wine and how it differentiates itself from other things like spirits and beer and all these other things. How the history of what wine is, how it's been a part of culture for as long as it has. I guess one of the important pieces here is that in most of the world, wine and food weren't really differentiated until the early 1900s. For the most part, wine and food were the same thing, right? I say this all the time. If you went to Italy and you went to a little, Italian grandmother's house for dinner, and you said, "Oh, I don't drink," she'd say, "Okay," but she'd still serve you a glass of wine with your food. In her mind, that's not drinking, right? That's part of the meal. It's wine. And so the point in me saying this is that there are some wines that you might not even love until you put them with food. And that's what I find so intriguing about things like this. I love nice backbone of acidity, but there are some wines like some Chocolinas, right, which the acidity is so high, I can't just sit at a bar and have a glass of it. But I sure as hell can put it with the right food and really enjoy that wine. So sometimes the wine is really made for food, as we say a lot of times. These wines are made for food, but sometimes they perfect when you've paired them with the right food. All right, so some of our pairings here. Lemon sole with Sager and Verdier Sancerre, right? Sancerre is hot. It's the rage. Everybody wants it. Some cities are slowing down, but many cities are picking up more and more. But the acid in this wine will balance the lemon, right? Which is obviously super acidic as well. And then it'll cut through the buttery fat. But it is elegant enough to not overpower the light, flaky sole, which is why Sancerre has been so popular, because it is so food and Sancerre go so well together, and there's a lot of different things we could put as a recommended pairing with Sager and Verdier Sancerre. But that's exactly when you see that the acid balances out the lemon, cuts through the fat, but then it still has the elegance to not overtake the sole. There's a pretty special wine that can do something like that, right? There's not every wine can do that. Ceviche with Araucano Humo Blanco Sauvignon Blanc, right? Biodynamic, natural Sauvignon Blanc. This is a really classic pairing of citrus and acid, but it's delicate enough to highlight the seafood and not overtake the dish. So it's important to note that as well. Again, you'll see here that 3 out of the 4 pairings are with Sauvignon Blanc, right? Which are certainly what work well with high acid foods.
I was actually going to touch on that too, Matt.
Yeah,
I picked 3 different styles, and by all means, please, if you are able to pull a sample of each one of these, and you will see what vast difference between the three are, even though they're the same varietal. Sancerre is elegant. It's very typical. This Huracano Humo Blanco, again, very elegant and delicate as a Sauvignon Blanc and can pair really well with any type of shellfish seafood. And then the Sea Pearl is, which Matt will talk on again, is just your typical New Zealand style Sauvignon Blanc. Very different in style. So it just wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. Sauvignon Blanc is such a versatile grape, right, or varietal that you can have three dishes that are very unique, and every one of these might not go with all of them. But Sea Pearl, yeah, it's kind of that kick you in your face, high acid, high fruit New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, right, which is obviously something that's very popular these days. Sea Pearl's bright citrus notes. Go ahead, Michelle. Did you say something? Oh, okay, sorry. Sea Pearl's bright citrus notes will balance the lemon and enhance the butter and capers. I think the important point, because chicken piccata, to me, the toughest thing to pair with chicken piccata is because of the capers, right? And one, because they're unique. Some people love them, some people hate them, but also because they have a really interesting characteristic that fruit and acid can kind of uplift with the Sea Pearl Sauvignon Blanc. And I'll be fully transparent, just as I mentioned, some wines I enjoy more when paired with food. Chicken piccata is not my favorite dish, but I would house a chicken piccata with Sea Pearl Sauvignon Blanc, right? Because together, I love them, right? And then the last one, which is a red, which is a cool way to look at it as well, is that pasta with red sauce, right? Everybody likes pasta with red sauce. If you live where I live in northern New Jersey, there's 17 billion of these restaurants around you, right? Argent as well. With La Fiera Primitivo. And I certainly love Italian Primitivo, right? And one of the reasons is for the acid, right? It's not just fruit. It's not too sweet. It's got great acid. But the rich, damp, jammy, dark fruit notes, they'll tone down the acid in the tomato sauce, and they'll elevate the herbaceous basil and oregano. So to us, really, really cool classic pairing. Primitivo with pizza, similar as well, right? It's something that really goes well together because of this tomato sauce. And tomato sauce can be difficult because of the acid. You have to make sure you have a red that can pair as well.
We have a comment from Christy Delovich.
Yes.
To you, Matt. Those New Jersey restaurants are my favorite. She'll meet you anytime.
It's a date. All right, so bitter. So what do we consider when we're pairing bitter foods? Bitter food increases bitterness in wine. Super important, right? Because you can destroy a dish, you can destroy a wine if you're pairing bitter food with bitter wine, right? Because it already is going to be increased. Bitterness is very subjective, as we all know, right? Most of us have been doing this a while. Our palates have gotten a little bit tamed down, so we can handle a little more bitterness than others. But it's certainly subjective, just like all of this is. But we know to avoid pairing bitter wines with bitter foods as they compound and create more bitterness, right? It's just not enjoyable. The idea of food and wine pairing is that is it enjoyable. And like I said earlier, you're uplifting the food and the wine. So the takeaway here, with a bitter dish, look for a less bitter wine. Consider white wine or low tannin reds. All right, so recommended pairings. Again, not simple pairings, but asparagus with Procht Organic Grüne Veltliner Rottenpullen, right? So this is a single vineyard Gruner, right? We have the traditional Procht Gruner, which you guys all know. Rottenpullen, hopefully most of you know as well, is a single vineyard version of that from Rottenpullen, of course. But this wine, bright, crisp wine, has notes of apricot and peach that will subdue the bitterness of the asparagus and complement the savory aspect of the vegetable. Asparagus is super unique, right? And throughout Europe, it's a lauded dish, right? As especially, let's say, white asparagus, but also green asparagus. When the season's in, everybody goes crazy eating fresh asparagus. And certainly this part of the world of Austria, where Procht is from, asparagus is a super important piece. But that's a nice one to connect. Dark chocolate with Zaccardi Q Cabernet Sauvignon. So the soft tannins of the cab balance the bitterness of the dark chocolate, while the dark fruit amplifies the rich sweetness, right? So we don't have to just think about Q Cab going with steak. There's other ways we can pair wines like this, right? It doesn't have to just like we always tell people when we're trying to sell into a retailer. If that retailer says, I'm all good with Argentina, I don't need any more, that's not the end of the conversation, right? Then we start talking about mountain wines. We start talking about high ratings. We start talking about natural wines, organics. Like we find other avenues into that same place by dancing around the fact that they don't want any more Argentinian wine. Same thing here. We're trying to find a way to pair Q-Cab. Let's not always go with the standard of steak, right? Or fatty meat. Let's go into dark chocolate, which is a great pairing. And because of the high elevation of Zuccardi, of all the Zuccardi wines, but this Q-Cab, the tannins are soft, right? They're not overly powerful like young tannins. These are the tannins that have some roundness to them. All right, Brussels sprouts with Tortoise Creek Chardonnay. So buttery Chardonnay coats the tongue and aids to diminish the bitter notes of Brussels sprouts. I think that's an important one because a lot of people struggle with pairing with Brussels sprouts. And still to this day, the past 10 years, Brussels sprouts have really had a run, right? Every restaurant you know of has Brussels sprout salads, sides of Brussels sprouts, fried Brussels sprouts, sauteed Brussels sprouts, sous vide Brussels sprouts, everything you can imagine. So a nice buttery Chardonnay is perfect to pair with Brussels sprouts. Arugula salad with Masfi Rosé Cava. Another interesting one because arugula, super bitter. I mean, probably the most bitter of normal greens that you see every day. So the fruity bubbles tone down the bitterness of the arugula and cut the fat of an olive oil dressing. So not a simple one. I have heard so many people say that arugula is like just almost impossible to pair with, but this is a way to do it, right? With nice fruity bubbles, with a nice mousse that can really uplift the dish and not let that bitterness bring you down. All right, so umami, also known as savory. So this is what we call the mysterious fifth flavor. It's called umami. In fact, up until the 1980s, nobody even used the word umami, right? If you weren't in the Far East, it didn't exist. Nobody mentioned it, right? Now it does. Now it's something that everybody's chasing. But it is a savory, earthy taste, and it's found in many fermented foods like soy sauce, Parmesan cheese, ripe soft cheeses, as well as eggs and oysters. It increases the perception of bitterness and acidity, but it decreases the perception of sweetness and body in wine. So it's difficult to pair with wine because of the varying salt levels that the different meals contain. So what do we consider when we're doing this? High umami content without a salt level makes the wine taste harder. So go for sweet or off-dry wine like Chenin Blanc or Riesling. Vinum Chenin Blanc or one of 5,000 Rieslings we have from Germany, right? Would be perfect options there. High umami content with a high salt level has the opposite effect. So you need to go for more acidic wines. So umami is probably the most difficult to figure out because you have to know more than just umami, right? There's more you have to dig into when you talk about umami. Umami generally makes the wine more acidic, gives it more of a burn, and makes it lose some of its fruitiness. So go for a wine that has plenty of fruit, keeping in mind that the different levels of acidity and sweetness depend on the salt level. Takeaway here is that an umami dish, look for wines that are more fruity and tannic. Just as a generalization, look for wines that are more fruity and tannic. So again, recommended pairings. So this one we went back and forth because I'm from Boston, so oyster pairing is super important to me, right? But with oysters, we said Zuccardi Facile Chardonnay. Some of you might say Chardonnay with oysters, but Facile Chard is, I'll put it up next to almost any Chablis you guys have in your book and taste it next to it and see what you think, right? So to me, that's like Chablis and oysters, which I'm a big proponent of. But this complex wine with bright acid and bright fruit, it matches the complexity of the oyster's salinity and sweetness. And it's perfect together. It really is, right? For a lot of reasons. Megan, did I see your hand up?
I meant to press the heart reaction.
Oh, sorry.
Because I love that Chardonnay. I think that's such a great pairing. So good call.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. One of the traditional ones we see when we look at hold on one second. Just had to mute. I'm the king of muting, so don't take offense if I mute you. I notice when people are unmuted, I go right on it. So anyway, yeah, it's one we had a lot of fun with because oysters really belong with a great white wine, right? And it's a very unique dish. And there's a lot, to Michelle's point, there's salinity, there's sweetness, depends on what coast it's from, it depends on the waters that it's in, all that stuff. But Zuccardi Facile, perfect. So this one's $129 by the bottle, which means, your bottle cost is sitting somewhere in the $40 to $45 a bottle range, right? Niçoise salad with Les Charmel Côte de Provence Rosé. Right? $12 by the glass. great little rosé as Cote de Provence has gone up and up and up in price. We've really held it with Les Charmel, named after the founder, Mel Master, who passed away last year, as well as his son, Charlie Master. So Char Mel. If nobody knew that, that's why it's named Charmel, because of Charlie and Mel. But the fresh strawberry notes complement the multitudes of flavor in the salad, but mostly it decreases the salty and highlights the savory. And that's the important part. It's why Cote de Provence Rosé is perfect everywhere, right? It's perfect with food. It's perfect on a patio on its own. It's perfect in a pool. It's, it doesn't matter when, it pairs well with everything, an activity as well as a food. This one's I'm certainly going to try later on. Parmesan cheese with Gran Passione Pinot Grigio. So Gran Passione Pinot Grigio is actually from Friuli. A lot of people forget this. When you think Gran Passione, you think $14.99 kind of low price Appassimento wine for an Italian restaurant or on an Italian section of a store. Sorry. But the Pinot Grigio from Gran Passione is a high quality Pinot Grigio from Friuli, right? It's not one to mess around with. If you're looking for that next level of Pinot Grigio, try Gran Passione Pinot Grigio. I think you're going to be surprised. So this is about $10 by the glass. Again, for Friuli. This is a classic pairing of a bright acid wine to cut through saltiness and cheese and allow the savory earthiness to shine, right? Parmesan and Gran Passione, perfect together. Last but not least, mushroom pizza with Santa Julia Organic Malbec, which is about $9 by the glass, right? This is a modern pairing of a soft tannic Malbec that is fruit forward to complement the Italian cheese and soften the salty to allow the savory mushrooms to stand out in flavor, right? So it uplifts pieces of this dish, and that pizza tastes better when you've paired it with Santa Julia Organic Malbec. That's the point here, right? Is that we're trying to uplift both things, and you're actually making the food better. One of the things that, I think this part Michelle will cover, but your best chefs, they understand umami, they understand flavors, and they understand they have to include a lot of different flavors in their dishes, right? So they're not just mono dishes that are just salty or just sweet. So to them, pairing is a lot easier and it makes a lot more sense. And when they pick their wine list, especially if the chef is the buyer, they're doing it because they understand their menu so well and they know exactly what needs to pair with that menu. And you can still help, because it doesn't mean they've picked the brand. They know the category they want, right? They know the area, the region, but it doesn't mean that they've picked what the actual brand is. That's where you come in. You're the experts of your portfolio. You know about these producers. Hopefully you visited a lot of them, and you can bring that expertise to the table. All right, so spicy. So spiciness, again, is not always included in this. We decided to include it because I think it's super important. So did Michelle. I'm glad we're on the same page. But it certainly is something that pairs well with a lot of great wines from our portfolio. So spiciness can not only overwhelm wine, but it increases the perception of alcohol and tannin. So that is an important piece. You should not have high alcohol wines with spiciness, right? That, to me, it makes the wine taste bad, right? The alcohol's through the roof. It's not balanced anymore. So that's something to be careful about. So you want to look for other common elements to help bridge, as we talked about earlier, bridge the food and wine pairing. So herbs used in the food, richness of the sauce, fattiness of the protein used in the dish. That's how we're going to focus on for pairing. So what do we compare here? So we want low alcohol wines, like I mentioned, preferably with some balancing sweetness should be applied. Look for other common elements to help bridge the food, as we mentioned. And then the takeaway here is a spicy dish. Look for low alcohol and low tannin wine. Consider sweeter wines or super fruity low tannin reds. And you can have a lot of fun with spicy wines here. So I think that this is one that'll be nice. So lamb vindaloo, which I actually am almost sure I ate with Dimitri right outside your office in Pompano Beach. We didn't have El Burro, but we did have one of the natural wines from Santa Julia. So lamb vindaloo with Santa Julia El Burro natural Malbec, which is $12 by the glass. Remember, Santa Julia, they've got 5 natural wines now, all made naturally, all natural yeast, no intervention. Everything is really done in that way. But the fruity soft tannins and elegance in the wine, they cut through the fat of the lamb and they soften the spice and they enhance the gamey notes of the dish. So the next one would be dried chili chicken with Heinz Eifel Shine Riesling. Heinz Eifel Shine is one of our most volumetric Rieslings we have in our book. It's made by the Eiffel family. Ann Eiffel is the winemaker and owner. $8 by the glass. You can't beat it. Here's a little sneak peek. That's the new Shine label that nobody's really seen yet, so you can find it there. All right, nobody's seen that yet, but that's coming out soon. So the sweetness of this wine helps to make the spice of the dish tolerable, and it highlights the earthy flavors of the dish. The first place I'm going to look is Germany when I'm trying to pair with spicy foods. And it works really well, right? Sushi and spicy and German wines are really, really, really good together. Chicken korma and Fitzritter Gewürztraminer Spotlace organic, right? So this rich sweetness of Gewürz balanced with the spiciness of the peppers and the low acid cuts through the yogurt, right? So this is a really good pairing as well. Fitzritter is from Pfalz. Really an incredible area where they're based, really known for their sect, right? Their sparkling Riesling, but it makes a wide array of wines, and this is an interesting one to pair, which is $18 by the glass. I mean, it's a really good bottle of wine for $18. All right, now fat. So fat decreases acidity and it decreases bitterness in wine. So fat coats the palate and makes the wine perceivably less acidic and tannic. So that's important. That's why it does that, because it coats your palate. Fat helps to bring highly structured wines down to size. And what do we consider when we're pairing fatty foods? Do a quick time check here, Michelle.
We got 5 minutes.
Yeah, we got 5 minutes. All right, you're going to go quick. I took out the last part, so the part you're in is the end. High acid wines can be used to cleanse the palate, so prepare the taster for the next bite as if it was their first. That's the idea. We're cleansing our palate. If you want your recent vintage Bordeaux and didn't have enough time to decant it, a salted ribeye can be an excellent choice, allowing you to perceive the more subtle and complex flavors of the wine, right? Takeaway. Fatty dish, look for a wine with higher acid, higher tannin, right? Malbec and steak, perfect example. We want to make sure we have big wines with this type of food. Recommended pairings, all right? A triple cream brie with Besserat de Bellefont Blanc de Blanc, crisp, acidic, fine bubbles. They cut through that lavish fattiness of the triple cream. Ribeye with Zaccardi Concreto Malbec, right? The balanced acid of Concreto cuts the juiciness of the ribeye, while the fruit and tannins magnify the richness. Cheeseburger with Carlos Arias Crianza, high acid tannins, an earthy, fruity balance, balance a juicy burger, a cool modern pairing, right? Buttery lobster with Urizzola Cioccolina, right? This is one that we went back and forth on quite a bit as well, but the clean, crisp body of the Cioccolina pairs with the meaty lobster, cleanses the palate of the butter, so you prepare your tongue for each bite. You're ready for that buttery lobster every bite. So often people talk about Chardonnay and lobster. We actually took it out, though, because, again, as a Bostonian, lobster to me is super important, right? And I don't like buttery, oaky shards with lobster. It's not my thing. We could definitely put Facile in there, but Michelle came up with Urizzola Cioccolina, which I think is a great pairing because of exactly as it says. That acidity just cuts right through that fatness that's in the lobster. Duck and Prospero Food Pinot Noir, again, super important. This is about as classic as it gets. Burgundy and duck, right? Nothing gets better than that. But Burgundian Pinot is known for high acid balanced fruit, and they can balance the fattiness of the duck while complementing any sauce or braise. All right, the 5 major theories. So, Michelle, we'll go through these as quick as we can. Then this will be the end.
I can talk fast. Yes. So there are 5 major theories of food and wine pairing that we can just kind of go over very quickly. You can see them there. Just basically kind of work for pretty much any situation that you have. You can scroll, Matt, and I'll talk. Color coding theory. Basically, what this is touching on is the color of the food should go with the color of the wine. So we're talking white wine with white meat, red wine with red meat. More than often, if it's a lighter type of meat, you do want a lighter style of wine. And so that really would kind of lead you to a white wine or a rosé. Again, heavier meats, red meats, you want a heavier red wine that will pair with it. You can keep rolling right along. I can talk really fast. The next one is weight matching theory. Basically, it's kind of similar to color, but now to weight. You're matching the weight of your food to the weight of the wine. So if you have, for example, earlier, the arugula salad with a rosé. It's a light salad, a little bitter, but you also have a light rosé that has some fruity elements that help balance each other out. So you're balancing, and you're kind of considering the weight of both the food and the wine, the flavors of both the food and the wine as well. Next one's going to be flavor matching, which is one that you can pretty much play with and really can be applicable to anything. It takes into account all the flavors that are in the food as well as all the flavors that are in the wine. So you can kind of play with this quite a bit. So the one that I picked here was, well, I live in Texas, so we have a lot of fajitas here. And it's always hard to kind of pair Mexican food. And I found that Volver Single Vineyard Tempranillo, it is a game changer when it comes to pairing with, you know, the meat and the spice of Mexican food, but yet it does come from Spain. It really helps to kind of balance it out. So, you know, this theory, you have a lot of play with this particular theory.
Yeah, probably the most fun, right?
The most, yeah. Classic region is another one of my favorites. If it grows together, it goes together. I learned this way back in the day when I first started learning about wine. Basically, anywhere you are in the world, that food is going to go with that wine because there's a lot of similar characteristics that have to do with climate, soil, topography, can't speak, and any kind of like common cultural heritage. So Italy is a great country to kind of focus on when it comes to that. Down below, you'll see our Ricosa Barolo, which I love, and it has a fantastic BTG price pretty much across the nation, with some truffle pasta. Truffles grow in Piedmont very wildly, and people go to Piedmont specifically for truffles. This wine is going to pair with it beautifully. And you see some Prosper Mofu, the Haute Côte de Nuit with beef bourguignon. Classic pairing.
The only thing I'd add to this slide is number one, yeah, when you're talking about Italy, nothing better. And if it's from there, if you've got goats walking around, I mean, if you've got, you know, lamb that are walking around amongst the vineyards, it's going to go well with that for sure. And I ascribe to this for sure. The other thing is that even some of our wineries do this, right? At Sicardi's winery in the Uco Valley, actually, Sebastian wanted to only serve goat because that's what's local to where the winery is in Altamira, right? They only have goat there. They don't have beef. So even though Argentina is known for beef, he wanted to only serve goat. He didn't end up winning that battle with his sister Juli, but he wanted it because he understands this. If it grows together, it goes together.
That is what you'll get served if you do go to that on that trip to Sicardi. You get a lot of goat, and it's delicious. And do we have one last one?
Yeah, this last one is this right here.
Oh,
balance
I'm sorry. The balance theory. So balance theory is another one that's kind of a little more, I guess, new in theory. Recently by Tim Haney, he's a master of wine. Eat and drink whatever you want, but balance it with condiments and spice, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, you can kind of alter your dishes to fit whatever wine it is that you're wanting to have that evening, or vice versa. Make your wine fit whatever food you're having that evening. It takes quite a bit. You have to really know your consumers. You have to really know your restaurant cuisine in order to kind of make this type of pairing. What I put down at the bottom was a ratatouille with Montgravet GSM. Ratatouille can be made, and it's peasant food. It's always the best food, but it can be various vegetables. It could be various levels of spicy or herbaceousness for the sauce. And the Montgravet GSM is just so complementary to anything that you kind of throw in the dish. So it helps to kind of balance it out. So this is another theory that's pretty easy to play and manipulate with.
Yeah, and I think as Michelle mentions here, most great chefs will ensure that their dishes encompass all of the 6 major tastes. So it's easier to pair wine with great chef's food, right? Because they understand it. They understand why it's like that. And you know, the point is you want to drink that Barolo with that burger. All right, fine. So maybe we put some truffle cheese on top, right? Like we find ways to make to bridge the pairing, all right? That's the idea. So this is for you guys. We're not going to go through it, but this is a nice little easy food and wine pairing chart to show you the basics of meat, cheese, seafood that can go with specific varietals, right? Very nice. Again, not something we'll go through, but it's really helpful for you guys to take this, print it out, have it in your books, and be ready to go. So look, we're pretty much on time. I'm impressed with us. Thanks. Great job, Michelle.
Thank you.
So listen, we want to thank everybody. I think, you know, one of the important pieces is that and I said this to my daughter earlier this week, right? I've been in the wine business since I was 15 years old, but I don't even remotely know everything, right? None of us do. And I also said to her, I don't want to work with anybody that thinks they know everything. The point is, we're always here to learn. So we are here to help you guys see some of this stuff, but also to learn from you all. So anybody who has insight, wants to send a note, wants to discuss some other things that we should include. The learning piece is what's so fun about this business, is why Winesellers University is something that, you know, Arjun and I discussed at a lunch in the city and was written on the back of a napkin, and now it's happened 5 times. But the point is, it's so much fun because this is what we all love. We're here because we're not selling widgets. We're selling things that have history and we're passionate about, and we want to tell stories, and we want to pair with food, and we want to uplift communities as well as meals, right? Thanks for the time today. I really appreciate it. So does Michelle. Michelle, I thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for all your help with this, and we look forward to the next one.
Michelle, Matt, thank you. Wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
Have a good weekend,
weekend,
everybody.
guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for an awesome meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.